Zodwa, thanks for coming.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
So I wanted to isolate this and understand it in the context of broad-based black economic empowerment.
Yes.
It's a mouthful. It's a mouthful.
It is. It is.
Are we talking about a large percentage here of shares that are owned by black shareholders?
Look, if we reflect and we go back to where we come from as a country, you'll recall that in 2003 the B-BBEE legislation was passed. Yeah. That was really trying to now advance economic transformation of black people, and then in 2013 amendments were made to improve it, because when the country reflected, we're not achieving what was intended and not also with the speed that was intended.
Yes.
So now, where we are at the moment, yes, there has been some progress, but it's very, very, very insignificant compared to where we should be. Right. If you look at our report, last year we released a report that looked at the JSE-listed companies that have filed compliance reports to look at black ownership. Yeah. In fact, what we picked up was that last year, in 2017, we regressed from 32% in terms of overall ownership recorded to about 27%. So which means that there's a need for us to actually just add more in terms of initiatives that are going to advance and facilitate the transfer of ownership to black people.
Absolutely, and also educate black people not to keep selling their shares, right?
Exactly, but I think there's one thing that people must remember, that we're not saying black people must sell their shares, but at least if an asset is yours, you should feel free to trade it in the manner that you feel, so that you can make profit, you can actually even invest further in other things. But what we would like is for black people to actually acquire the knowledge of running businesses, the knowledge that they didn't have before. So that is what is actually important. We want them to use the opportunity to learn, not to just be passive shareholders, but to actually be operationally involved.
Absolutely, and the managers of the businesses that they are in, as well as shareholders. What about this issue around the trusts? How big an issue is it?
It becomes a big issue now, particularly because what we have is a situation where when there's a rule on the ground or a law on the ground, you find that there are some instances where models are being sold around to the market.
Yes.
And I think
there's an industry around it.
There's an industry that creates models, and then they sell it to entities. And it's not the trusts that are a problem. So we've said it before, and we are emphasizing it again. Using a trust as a vehicle to facilitate ownership by a large number of people is actually an effective way of broadening participation. Right. So we'd like to encourage that. Okay. But what we want is for entities to make sure that when they create that kind of a scheme, they actually make sure that it does meet the rules. Because in terms of the codes of good practice, if you are doing an ownership deal, the Commission will test it on 3 areas. Right. We'll test it on exercisable voting rights. So we'll need to know whether those people have exercisable voting rights in your entity through the trust. And then we will then also check if they are getting economic interest, meaning that they are getting benefits that are flowing from the ownership right that comes from that arrangement. And the third one is net value. At the end of the day, if that acquisition was done by debt, there must be repayment of that debt such that ultimately the asset is unencumbered and the right is not restricted.
Absolutely.
So those are 3 things that are important. But if you are doing that structure through a trust, then there are additional rules that are in the codes. The additional rules are saying, if you are creating a trust, for instance, for employees, your employees, you need to make sure that the employees, at least through that trust, they are able to appoint at least 50% of the trustees that are going to be the trustees in that trust. Okay. So most of these entities, when we test their trust, they do not even have that basic rule. Sure. So, but what we've done is to give them then an opportunity, because in terms of the major BE transactions, those are the transactions that are over 25 million and above. So they are required to register with us. Then we will register them so that it's transparent, it's known. But when we assess them, then we pick up the non-compliance, we give them an opportunity then to fix it, and we help them to fix it. And then it's only those ones that do not want to fix that then will refer for investigation so that action can be taken.
Right. Yes. Have you been able to establish what percentage of the trusts have got a problem in terms of adhering to your rules?
In terms of I'll talk to what we are handling.
Yes.
The Measure B transactions, the minister issued the notice for thresholds in June 2017. So on the 9th of June 2017, we started receiving this. So up until 2018 December, we had received 341 transactions.
Okay.
All right. So out of that 341 transactions, 33% involved trust models.
Right. Okay.
All right.
Okay.
So 33% of that involved trust models. Now, when we then start assessing those that involve the trust, the majority of them, over 50%, do not meet the rules. But what we are comforted by is the fact that where we have advised the company and said, these are the areas that you are not complying in, please fix that. They have actually fixed them. Some companies have gone, revised their trust deeds, did the reappointment of their trust, the board of trustees properly, and then they've resubmitted that. And we've confirmed to them that you are now compliant.
So the sense you are getting is that it's not a deliberate attempt to circumvent the rules. It's more omission than it's actually clearly designed to try not to comply with the rules.
Yes, it becomes a deliberate circumvention when we have advised you and you don't. Yes, action. But for those ones that we've picked up, that's why I'm saying to you that sometimes when we look at them, you find that 10 of the transactions that we have, the trust deed reads the same. Sure. Like you can see that they have a model that has been sold by somebody
off the shelf.
Exactly. Yeah. So you can see that the errors are actually in multiple of them when they shouldn't be there. So if get some of these things right, then it should. And we're not saying people should not use advisors or consultants, but all we're saying is that before you implement as well, try to engage with us as well so that we can give you free advice and tell you that this is compliant or not. And then you can run.
Yeah. Yes. So I was going to make the point that, businesses always complain that compliance is an issue and it's taking up a lot of time. You can see why they go and buy one off the shelf instead of developing one for their own. I wanted to find out who slept on the job here by not seeing these things when they were coming through.
Look, I don't think anybody really slept on the job, but I think that as a country, we haven't really put much emphasis and with seriousness and with the consistency it requires in terms of how we approach BBBEE and economic empowerment in particular. Because when we have inconsistent applications, then we're not going to make an impact. Sure. But what we did when we started, as you recall, that we were set up in 2016, when we started, we did our assessment and we picked up that the majority of the people did know that there's BBBEE, but they didn't know how to apply it. Right. So there was lack of understanding. Okay. But then we also picked up that there was also the tick box exercise that is there, the approach. So what we're saying is that we're not going to put a blame on anybody, but we're saying that we all have a responsibility. If you are a measured entity, you are a company that is going to be verified to say, this is my BBBEE score, this is my black ownership and all of that, make sure that the claims that you are making are actually compliant. And the regulator is there to assist you to actually make that is clear. But also the citizens that are supposed to be beneficiaries of that.
It's their job as well.
It's their job, because if I'm a black person and I get to be approached to be a BE partner, but I don't even read the agreements, I don't even know what they mean, I'm not going to get the value of what is intended by this BBBEE legislation. So the point that I want to make is that because of the inconsistent messaging, because of the lack of understanding of what this is actually intended to achieve, we find people doing tick box exercises, people not paying attention to it, and then we're not making an impact. So I'm saying, let's focus, let's do the right thing, let's do it because it's correct, not because it's a compliance.
I was going to put it in Sintu and say, let's not just eat the money, let's also go and work for it. Thank you, Zodwa. That's the Commissioner of B-BBEE Commission, Zodwa Ntuli. Thanks for joining us.